What if that exhaustion you wake up with every single morning isn't just you needing more sleep? What if it's actually a warning signal from the most fundamental energy system in your body? In my 22 years of practice, I've seen this countless times. Patients over 50, their labs come back normal, yet they are bone tired. They think they're dealing with simple tiredness, but what's really happening is a structural failure at the cellular level. And the difference between those two things, well, that determines whether rest ever helps you or never does. This pattern has a name, it has a documented cause, and now it has an intervention the research supports with real clarity.
So before we get into the science and the 3-day protocol, let me just ask you something directly. Think about it for a second. When was the last time you woke up feeling genuinely ready for the day? I don't mean just functional enough to get coffee. I mean with actual, real reserve energy. If you're struggling to remember, then please stay with me. This is for you.
All right, let's dive in. The first and honestly the most important step here is to really understand what we're actually dealing with. This isn't about just being tired. This is about a very specific biological signal. And once you understand the root cause, the solution becomes so much clearer.
This slide right here shows the critical distinction. On the left, you've got what's basically a low battery. That's tiredness. It's a temporary energy debt. You rest, you sleep, you recharge. But on the right, that's a broken battery. That's a mitochondrial warning. It's a structural deficit in your body's capacity to produce energy. The problem isn't how much energy you've spent, it's how much your cells can physically produce in the first place. And that is why rest alone just can't fix it.
And look, this isn't just a feeling. It's a documented biological reality that we see in the research over and over again. Studies show that mitochondrial function declines by about 10% every single decade after you turn 40. So by the time you're 70, your cellular energy capacity can be cut by up to half. This is the root cause we have to address.
So that brings us to the why. Why does this happen? The research points to 3 big interconnected mechanisms. Understanding how these 3 work together is really the key because it explains exactly why the solution has to be done in a very specific sequence. Okay, mechanism number 1 is basically a maintenance system blackout, and it all centers on a molecule called NAD+. The easiest way to think about NAD+ is as the electricity for your cellular factory. It literally powers up the supervisors, these proteins called sirtuins, that are in charge of all mitochondrial maintenance and repair. If you don't have enough NAD+, the supervisors just can't do their job. Simple as that.
Now look at this chart. This is huge. Between the ages of 40 and 60, your NAD+ levels can drop by roughly 50%. This is not a small dip. This is a systemic power outage. The maintenance system, those sirtuin proteins, they just can't activate efficiently. So the old damaged mitochondria don't get replaced, and the entire system starts to age without any renewal.
And this brings us to a really crucial point. While some of these NAD+ precursors like NMN or NR are part of the protocol we'll discuss, there is a critical safety check. If you are on medication for blood pressure, for diabetes, or for any heart condition, you must not, I repeat, must not start these supplements without speaking to your doctor first. This is non-negotiable.
The second mechanism is something I call the smoke cycle. Think of it this way. A healthy mitochondrion is a clean, efficient engine. But a damaged one, well, it's like a dirty, smoky engine. It sputters out all these excess free radicals, that's the smoke, which then damages the mitochondrial DNA right next to it. So now you have 2 smoky engines, then 4. It becomes this vicious, self-amplifying loop of damage.
And this is absolutely vital to understand. You cannot sleep your way out of this cycle. Rest just doesn't interrupt it. What's more, trying to solve it by just popping antioxidant supplements can actually be counterproductive if you do it out of sequence, because it can interfere with your body's own natural cleanup signals.
All right, let's move to the third mechanism, which is maybe the most direct of all. This one involves coenzyme Q10, or CoQ10. So if NAD+ is the electricity, think of CoQ10 as the messenger running up and down the assembly line. Its job is to physically carry electrons between stations to produce ATP, which is energy. If you don't have enough messengers, the whole production line just grinds to a halt.
The decline in CoQ10 is just incredibly steep. From age 20 to age 80, your levels can drop by up to 65%. But I want you to pay close attention to that third bar on the right. For the millions of people on statin medications, those drugs inhibit the very same biological pathway that produces CoQ10. This leads to an additional 40% reduction. The biochemical link between this common medication and fatigue is direct and very well documented.
And we have another important warning here. If you happen to take the blood thinner warfarin, you need to know that CoQ10 supplementation, especially at the doses we're talking about, may reduce its effectiveness. Please consult your physician before you begin.
Okay, so we've identified the problem. We've gone through the mechanisms. Now, how do we actually fix it? We're moving to the protocol. And I want you to focus on the most important word on this slide, sequenced. The order of operations isn't just important, it's everything. Doing these steps out of order, it just won't work.
The logic here is actually very simple and really powerful. First, you have to clean out the old, dysfunctional, smoke-producing mitochondria. Then, and only then, do you stimulate the creation of new, efficient ones. And finally, you protect the whole renewed system. You'd never put new furniture into a house before you've cleaned it out, right? Well, your biology is no different. So day one is all about cleaning house. We need to activate a process called mitophagy. That's the body's way of selectively removing damaged mitochondria. A simple 16-hour fast is one of the most powerful ways to do this. Pairing that with a 30-minute brisk walk in the morning while you're still fasted really amplifies that cleanup signal. Then, with your first meal of the day, you'll add 200 milligrams of ubiquinol. That's the active, more absorbable form of CoQ10.
Now on day 2, with a much cleaner cellular environment, we stimulate biogenesis, the creation of new mitochondria. The strongest signal for this is high-intensity interval training. And it doesn't have to be crazy. Just 8 rounds of 20 seconds high effort followed by 10 seconds of rest can be enough to send that signal. This is also when you introduce a starting dose of 250 milligrams of an NAD+ precursor like NMN or NR taken in the morning before food. And you can add some turmeric with black pepper to a meal to help manage any inflammation.
And day 3 is all about protection and optimization. A brief 30 to 60 second cold blast at the end of your shower can actually increase mitochondrial density. Getting morning sunlight, specifically the red and near-infrared light you get before 10 a.m., directly charges the batteries of your mitochondria. And finally, magnesium malate is critical because it's a key building block for hundreds of reactions inside your mitochondria.
Okay, let's bring all of this together. We're going to look at a real-world example, cover the most important safety check one last time, and then summarize the core message of this entire explainer.
I want to tell you about Robert, a 58-year-old retired engineer from Columbus, Ohio. He came to me with 2 years of fatigue, normal labs, but he'd been on statins for 14 months. Within 6 weeks of a protocol just like this, he told me, and I'll never forget it, he said, I had gotten a version of myself back I thought was gone. That's the potential human impact of applying this science correctly.
And Robert is not an outlier. According to CDC data, over 38% of Americans over 50 report this kind of persistent fatigue. So the crucial point is this. If you're feeling this way, it is not a personal feeling. It is not a moral failing. It is a widespread biology problem.
Now, before you even consider any part of this protocol, this is the most important step of all. If your fatigue has lasted for more than 4 weeks, your first call is to your doctor. You need to rule out common, treatable medical conditions like hypothyroidism, iron deficiency anemia, undiagnosed type 2 diabetes, and sleep apnea. Please, do not skip this step.
So I want to leave you with this thought. The very same scientific literature that documents the age-related decline of our mitochondrial function is the same literature that documents the partial reversibility of that decline with specific, targeted interventions. The deterioration is a fact of aging, but the potential for renewal is also a fact.
You see, this isn't about chasing youth or some fantasy of anti-aging. This is about functional biology. It's about having the physical energy to actually do the things you want to do. So the final question isn't about turning back the clock. It's about moving forward. What would you do with an energy system that works for you again instead of against you?
You know, if you're over 60, something really interesting happens every single morning. There's this 2-hour window where your cellular power plants, your mitochondria, are just primed for renewal. But, and this is the crazy part, almost everyone wastes this critical time. So today, we're going to break down exactly what that window is, why it's there, and how you can actually use it. Okay, let's get right into it. So, first things first, let's just face a hard fact from the research. After you hit 60, the decline in your mitochondria doesn't just continue, it hits the accelerator. The rate of deterioration actually speeds up to about 3 times what it was in any previous decade. That's a huge jump. So let me just ask you, does that resonate? Have you felt like your energy has dropped off more in the last couple of years than it did in the entire 10 years before that? If you're nodding along, I want you to know you're not imagining it. There's a real biological reason for that feeling, and that's what we're digging into. Right, so this feeling, this kind of energy cliff you might feel after 60, it's not just a vague sense of getting older. No, it's rooted in a very specific biological problem that starts to snowball. Okay, so you know those things that chip away at our energy throughout life? Well, after 60, they gang up on you. Your NAD+, which is this critical molecule for making energy, it starts to decline way faster. You've got more cellular rust, basically, from something called free radicals, and your levels of CoQ10, a vital antioxidant for your mitochondria, just plummet. The key thing here is they don't just add up, they compound, creating a much, much steeper drop in energy than you've ever felt before. But here's the flip side, and honestly, this is the exciting part. The very same science that shows us this steep decline also points to this incredible opportunity, a sort of hidden window of time every single morning when your body is practically begging for renewal. And why does this window exist? Well, it all comes down to your body's internal clock, your circadian rhythm. This clock turns on the genes responsible for mitochondrial health, especially this master regulator gene called PGC1 alpha. And get this, the activity of these renewal genes hits its absolute peak in the first 1 to 2 hours after you wake up. Your body is literally sitting there waiting for the right instructions. So the big question is, what are you doing in that time? Think about a typical morning. You wake up, you stay inside, maybe have some coffee, watch the news, and then grab a sugary breakfast. That routine, it actively shuts down those renewal signals. But an activated morning, one with some morning sun, a bit of movement before you eat, and the right kind of breakfast, that sends the exact signals your mitochondria are crying out for. And look, this isn't just some abstract science experiment. This directly impacts how you feel, day in and day out. So, let's walk through the 4 specific, doable things that the research shows can flip the switch on that morning window. All right, here's the game plan. It boils down to 4 key steps, and each one plays a specific role. We've got morning sunlight, movement before you eat, a really strategic first meal, and then perfectly timed Q10. Let's tackle the first one. Step 1 is so simple. Just get outside for 10 to 20 minutes of direct sunlight sometime before 10 a.m. See, the morning light is packed with red and near infrared light. These waves actually go through your skin and give a direct jolt to a key enzyme in your mitochondria. It's like plugging your cells directly into a charger. It boosts energy production and reduces stress all at once. Now, I know what you're probably thinking, but wait, what about skin cancer? And that's a totally valid concern. But the science is really clear on this. The low UV light in the early morning is a completely different animal from the harsh UV rays at noon. For most of us, this short bit of exposure isn't the risk. It's a powerful tool we're just not using. Of course, if you have a specific medical history, check with your doctor. Okay, step 2. Movement before breakfast. We're talking about a 25 to 30-minute brisk walk while you're still in that fasted state. Doing this flips a powerful switch in your cells called AMPK. Think of AMPK as your body's cleanup crew. It tells your system to clear out the old, junky mitochondria and build brand new, super efficient ones. And that signal is way, way stronger when you exercise before you eat. And listen, this next part is incredibly important. A critical safety warning.
If you're taking certain medications for diabetes, especially insulin or sulfonylureas, exercising on an empty stomach could be dangerous. It can cause low blood sugar. This is not something to guess about. Please, you absolutely must talk to your doctor before trying this step.
So you've gotten your sun, you've had your walk. What you eat next is make or break. A typical breakfast like cereal, toast, or juice causes this huge insulin spike that just slams the brakes on that whole AMK renewal process you just worked to turn on. But a meal built around protein and healthy fats, think eggs, avocado, some nuts, it keeps insulin low and stable and lets those renewal signals keep humming along. Which brings us to the fourth and final piece of the puzzle. The number you see here, 200 milligrams, is our target dose, and it's for a crucial nutrient that our mitochondria desperately need as we age, CoQ10. Now, to get this right, you really want to use the ubiquinol form of CoQ10. It's just absorbed much better. Take that 200 milligrams with your protein and fat breakfast. And this is where you see how beautifully this all works together. Taking CoQ10 with fat can boost its absorption by as much as 50%. You're delivering it at the exact moment your mitochondria are primed and ready for it. So you might be thinking, okay, this all sounds great in theory, but does it actually work? Well, I want to tell you about a 64-year-old woman, we'll call her Margaret. She had that classic problem. She'd wake up with okay energy, but by noon, she'd hit a wall. So we completely redesigned her morning using these 4 keys. And her journey is so helpful for setting realistic expectations. This isn't an overnight fix, but within about 3 weeks, that afternoon crash started to disappear. By week 6, she said her mornings just felt different, better. And by the 3-month mark, a really objective measure, how fast she recovered from exercise, had gotten noticeably better. But before we wrap up, I have to talk about a really common mistake I see people make. It's something that can completely undo all this good work you're doing in the morning. We need to make sure these changes can actually last. Here's the trap. You can't have this amazing activated morning and then spend the rest of your day sitting down and eating a high-carb lunch. It's like taking 1 step forward and 2 steps back. The morning routine works best when the rest of your day supports it instead of fighting against it. Even just a short walk after lunch can make a world of difference. I really want to leave you with this one thought because it's the most important thing. Yeah, the decline gets steeper after 60, but your body's ability to heal and renew itself, it doesn't just vanish. The window might be a bit smaller, and you have to be more consistent with the signals, but the biology, it still responds. That capacity is absolutely still there. So you see, what changes after 60 isn't if your mitochondria can get better, but whether you give them the right conditions. That 2-hour window is going to open for you tomorrow morning, completely free of charge. The only real question left is, are you going to use it? So if the collapse of this one key molecule, NAD+, is what's really driving that energy drain after 60, well, then there's only one question that truly matters, right? Can we actually restore it? I'm not talking about in a lab or in a mouse. I mean in a living, breathing person with a supplement you can buy today. In this explainer, we're going to cut right through the marketing hype and get to the science. What do the human trials actually show? So many people feel this, that slump, a drop in energy that just seems to speed up after you hit 60. It feels different, right? You might just write it off as, well, I'm just getting older. But what if it's something way more specific? Something happening deep inside yourselves? Okay, let's get right into this. The fatigue that millions of people over 60 feel isn't just you being tired. The science is pointing to something much more concrete. A structural failure inside your mitochondria. You know, the power plants of your cells. This isn't just a feeling, it's a biological mechanism. And right at the heart of this failure is a molecule called nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide, or just NAD+. It's a powerhouse involved in literally hundreds of reactions in your body. But as it collapses with age, it creates a two-front war on your cellular energy. So here's problem number 1. As we get older, our DNA just takes more hits. It accumulates more damage. To fix this, our bodies call in these special repair crews, enzymes called PARPs. But here's the catch. These PARPs are incredibly hungry for NAD+. So the more damage there is, the more PARPs get activated and the faster your NAD+ supply gets drained. And that leads directly to problem number 2. With all that NAD+ getting gobbled up for DNA repair, there's just not enough left over for other critical jobs. Specifically, a group of proteins called sirtuins, which are absolutely essential for keeping our mitochondria in good shape, suddenly find themselves running on empty. Without NAD+, the sirtuins just can't do their job, and our cellular power plants start to fall apart. So, what does this actually look like in the real world? Well, take a look at this. The thing that's just staggering here is the sheer scale of the drop. We're talking about research from top institutions like Harvard, published in journals like Nature Aging, and they all show the same thing. By the time you hit age 60, your NAD+ levels have fallen by about 50%. 50! Compared to where you were at 40. This isn't just a theory. It's one of the most consistently proven findings in all of aging biology. Okay, so that's the problem. How do we even begin to fix it? Well, here's the challenge. You can't just take an NAD+ pill. The molecule is just too big to get into your cells directly. Instead, your body has to build it from the ground up, using smaller building blocks known as precursors. Let's see how that works. A precursor is basically just that, a building block. It's a smaller molecule that's able to sneak inside your cells, and from there, your internal machinery can convert it into the full NAD+ molecule. And in the world of supplements, the two that really dominate the conversation are NMN and NR. And this brings us right to the heart of it. NMN versus NR. Which one actually works better? Instead of just listening to what the supplement companies say, we are going to look directly at the human clinical trials. What does the evidence tell us about how these work in people, especially people over 60? All right, let's start with NMN. Its big claim to fame is that it converts to NAD+ in just a single step. Now, a really important trial from Washington University found that taking just 250 milligrams of NMN a day actually increased NAD+ levels right there in the muscle tissue of postmenopausal women. And it didn't just raise the levels, it improved their muscle insulin sensitivity. That's a huge deal. This was backed up by another trial from Keio University, which found it improved muscle function and even walking speed in older men. Now, let's look at NR. This one takes 2 steps to become NAD+. But the human trials on NR have been around a little longer, so the data we have is really solid. A major study from the University of Colorado found that NR boosted whole blood NAD+ by an impressive 60%. But that's not all. It also lowered key inflammatory markers, and a follow-up trial showed it could reduce arterial stiffness and even lower systolic blood pressure in older adults. Okay, I have to pause here for a critical reality check. This is the part that the marketing almost never tells you. While these increases are absolutely real and significant, they are partial restorations. A 60% increase sounds amazing, right? But remember, it's a 60% increase from a baseline that's already 50% depleted. It's moving the needle in the right direction for sure, but it is not taking you back to the levels you had when you were 40. So let's put them side by side. What have we got? NMN has that faster, one-step conversion, and the clinical data really points toward muscle function and insulin sensitivity. NR, on the other hand, takes 2 steps, but it's backed by a larger body of human trials, with some really compelling data on things like cardiovascular health and inflammation. So you can start to see how the choice might really depend on your specific health goals. So, what's the bottom line here? The honest-to-goodness answer, based only on the human trial data we have right now, is that we can't definitively say one is flat-out better than the other for everybody. It's nuanced. If your main concern is muscle health and function, the NMN data looks very interesting. If you're more focused on things like blood pressure or overall inflammation, then the NR data is definitely worth a close look. Look, knowing what to take is really only half the battle. The other half is knowing how to take it, because the protocol, getting the dose and the timing right, is every bit as important as which molecule you choose. First up, the dose. Simple enough. Looking at all those human trials we just talked about, the clinical consensus really lands in a pretty clear range. We're talking about 250 to 500 milligrams per day of either NMN or NR. This seems to be the sweet spot where we see real, meaningful biological effects in the research. Now for timing, and this part is absolutely crucial. The research is incredibly clear on this. For best results, you take NMN or NR in the morning, on an empty stomach. Why? Well, it's all about your body's natural rhythm. This is when your sirtuin activity is at its natural daily peak. You're basically giving the fuel to the engine at the exact moment it's revved up and ready to use it. Okay, so you're doing everything right. You've got the right dose, the right timing. When are you actually going to feel a difference? This is where so many people get discouraged and give up too early, because their expectations are frankly unrealistic. But the trial data gives us a very clear timeline. So here's how it plays out. Within just a few days, your actual NAD+ levels in your blood will start to rise. But, and this is a big but, that doesn't immediately translate to how you feel. The subjective stuff, feeling more energy, that often starts to kick in somewhere between weeks 4 and 8. The objective, measurable things that they saw in the trials, like better muscle function or lower blood pressure, those typically showed up between weeks 6 and 10. You have to be patient. This is a slow build. You know, this reminds me of a perfect real-world example. A patient, let's call him David, told me he'd quit taking NMN after 3 weeks because he felt nothing. But when we dug into it, he was taking a tiny dose at night with dinner. So we corrected his protocol. We got him on 250 milligrams first thing in the morning, fasted. And what happened? Around week 6, he started to notice a shift. By week 10, he was telling me his mornings just felt qualitatively different. His case just proves it. The protocol isn't a suggestion. It is absolutely essential. Okay, before we wrap this up, it is so important that we cover some warnings and then quickly summarize the biggest takeaways from all of this. All right, first things first, let's talk safety. This is non-negotiable. If you're on chemotherapy, if you take immunosuppressants, or if you have a history of hormone-sensitive cancers, you must talk to your doctor before even considering these supplements. And of course, if you have persistent fatigue, your first stop should always be your doctor's office to rule out other common culprits like thyroid problems or anemia. Remember, diagnose first, then optimize. So, let's boil it all down. What did we learn? 1. That fatigue after 60 isn't just in your head. It's a real structural problem tied to the collapse of NAD+. 2. Human trials show us this is at least partially reversible with precursors like NMN or NR. 3. The protocol is everything. The right dose and the right timing are critical. And finally, number 4, be patient. The real measurable results are gradual and can take 6 to 10 weeks to really show up. So there you have it. You now have this scientific framework to understand what's actually happening in your cells and what the real-world evidence supports. So the question I want to leave you with is this. Now that you have this information, what is the right next step for your health?